Who doesn't like playing mobile games? If you're like me and wonder what goes into creating an entertaining game, and if one can build a career in the gaming industry, then listen on. I am your host Paras Mehta, and today on India to Germany, I speak with Chaithanya Kamath, head of product at Huge Games in Berlin, about career in gaming. Chaithanya found his true passion in games from an early age and went on to do a master's in entertainment technology at Carnegie Mellon in the US. He has followed his passion ever since and has more than 10 years of experience in the field of game development. Welcome, Chaithanya. Thank you for speaking with us.
Hey, Paras, thank you for having me on the show as well.
So, Chaithanya, you have a lot of experience in the gaming industry. You've been working in this industry for more than 10 years now. How did you get into this area?
Sure, it's a long way back now. But it had an interesting start as well. So, I obviously grew up in the '90s, where my parents were able to afford a brick game, which was the hottest device that all the kids wanted to have. I mean, it was originally the Tetris game, but I think in throughout India we were able to buy these handheld brick game consoles which only played one level of Tetris. But it was exciting, and that was basically my start as well. So where I too had something similar to Tetris with a handheld console, and then my sort of parents bribed me into perform really well in my fifth grade to say that, like, hey, if you're going to get your first rank, we are going to maybe consider, and that's a maybe, consider getting one of those 8-bit consoles. I think like obviously in the '90s, India was not such a market where it was easily available to buy these Ataris or just consoles were not really accessible. I mean, you could only see them with kids whose uncles were living abroad, and they would bring them here. So what I was able to finally crack was get that first rank, and then my parents actually bought me this media video game console. It was an 8-bit one, and that was I had probably around 6 to 7 years solid run with it. They played a lot. My friends and we played a lot of Street Fighter, and then we like, I grew up in Bangalore, so we had this one shady area somewhere in the center of Bangalore called National Market, where we would go and buy these video game cassettes, and the ones where you could blow the dust off and then just put it back in, and then it would start working. So we used to exchange them and play a lot of it, and that was sort of how it was a very early start for me to get inspired by games. And then towards the end of 2000, sorry, the beginning of 2000 and end of '90s, I started seeing my friends have computers, and these we are talking about like Intel Pentium 1 and super back in the day computers which are so slow and only ran things like Doom or Wolfenstein, and but they were quite influential for me. It was super exciting to play all of those games as well. The funny thing was I was never allowed to play any of them on their computers, because they would just say, "Oh, you're here to just watch." So I would just sit there and watch my friends play and be like, "Oh, yaar, idhar mat jana, udhar mat jana," just getting there and just being part of the game. So you can almost relate it to what Twitch is today, where you're watching streaming, but this was more so live, watching your friends play and getting cussed at by saying, "Hey, touch nahi karna." So anyway, so then I finally was able to get the hands on PC. I think when I started with my engineering in 2002, I did my bachelor's in instrumentation technology in Bangalore itself, and I somehow managed to convince my parents that, like, I need a computer because I have to use it for my coursework. I mean, and they were like, all right, we'll just get you something. So they, obviously, I grew up in a middle class family. Buying a computer that was 40, 50,000 rupees was quite a big sum of money to spend. So I did manage to get one after a lot of convincing, and being angry and sad, and all the drama around it. So and then I do remember very clearly my mom one day asking her brother, like, does he really need this computer? And he was like, saying, what does he need it for? Is he going to play games on it? And I was very upset at my mom and dad, that, like, why do you need to ask him, what would I do with it? It's my computer. I'll do whatever I want. So I did end up then getting it, and well, exactly what was in their mind happened. I just kept playing games on it and did no coursework, right? So it was again, the time when I started playing like Need for Speed and Max Payne, Half Life. All these games were super influential for me back in the day, and that sort of continued through my engineering, where I made sure every semester exam I would finish at least one game. That sort of gave me like a good concentration boost to, and also a reason to just saying, oh, I want to finish my have my exams, and I have to prepare for it, but I also need some break, and that break would come in the form of playing one of these games. So every semester I finished one game at least. So and if I did not, I think my exams were it was prepared for a doom. Yeah, then after my graduation, I think I just got caught up in this, being busy with finding a job, and I got placed into Wipro after during my fourth year, and yeah, I really wanted to do, for whatever reason, microprocessors and stuff, but unfortunately, I was thrown into a call center, which they would fancily call like level 2 support. They gave me a bit of a dream about, oh, you're going to do amazing at this job, but it was not not too long before I realized there's nothing in the job that was exciting for me at all. So after basically spending 10 months there, I realized, this is just not my cup of tea, and I was getting frustrated. So I tried finding, is there anything else in the company that I could do? And Wipro has had like a PlayStation testing division, and then they also had like a defense contract from the Indian Army to do serious games. So serious games is more so like defense simulation games. And so that was something that I thought, what, I might actually be interested in doing that. But when I tried calling, talking to all these people, it was always like, oh, you, for the last 10 months you've been working in a call center. And I'm like, man, that was not me. It was, I have good grades, and I did really well in my engineering. Why wouldn't you let me just start in games? And unfortunately it did not happen. So, well, it was the way I look at it, it was their loss, and it was my gain, because I think what got what happened because of these rejections was, I was quite motivated to pursue what I really really love and care, which were basically two amazing outcomes that came out of this. So I just told myself that, like, hey, forget about what's happened in the last 10 to 12 months. Let's concentrate on what do I want next. So I told myself, I'm going to pursue my love for games, and how am I going to do that? And the second was, how I'm going to pursue my love towards this girl I met too. So that was a new thing for me. So I met my wife as well at Wipro, and so two amazing things came out of Wipro, which was my career and my now wife. So yeah, and then to chart out my path of how I would get there, I start, the only access I had back then was I could just start with a master's in game development. So then I applied to some universities in the US. I think this was another challenge that I must say is, like, in 2006, when I started with my application process, there was absolutely no resources to figure out, like, where would I go to pursue a master's in games? I mean, everyone would only go do masters in computer science or telecom or information science, whatever it is. I mean, or an MBA for that matter. but nobody would, when I would say, hey, I'm going to do masters in game development, and they would be like, "Pff, you're just joking yourself, like there's what's there's no career there." But and also, like, it was an early stage for game development scene in India too. There were maybe like two or three companies at the most, and they were also just doing um, outsourced work from the States or from Canada or whatever it is. um, so there wasn't a lot of information available, and luckily enough, I was able to crack through in Carnegie Mellon and in Pittsburgh, where they had a they still have the Entertainment Technology Center, which helps anybody interested in learning game development can get their start right there. And today, however, there's a lot more universities in the US which offer game development programs, not only at the master's level but also at a bachelor's level. And also for me, this was like, as soon as I got my admits, I was pretty excited that my girlfriend would be 2 hours away doing her MBA in Case Western. So it was, everything was fitting together quite nicely. And I said, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do this. So yeah, and moved to the US in 2008, and yeah, finished my master's in 2010 and been in the game industry ever since.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear how like one thing led to the other for you, how this time at Wipro or maybe was not the easiest for you, but also brought about these positive changes in your life, and how you continued to follow your passion and did something you enjoy. Yeah, it's very inspiring to hear this.
Thanks, Paris.
And moving back a little bit to Germany, closer to home.
Mhm.
So, what is the gaming industry in Germany like? Uh, Perhaps you could talk a little bit about some of the major trends in this area.
Sure. I would say that, like, right now, the industry is pretty hot. I mean, and gaming industry in general and gaming industry in Germany. So, with the COVID, probably one of the industries that has thrived with people being locked at home is gaming industry. And people are playing much more, they are spending more money in games as well. So and they're getting the entertainment out of it. So I think it's a win-win for the consumers as well as for the developers. um, Given and how it is in Germany, I think 10 years ago when I moved to Germany itself, the scene was, it wasn't so big. It was just starting out. But today, there are plenty of companies in Germany, and more so in Berlin itself. Like, I think because Berlin is a sort of art capital of Germany. You have too many of these expats coming in here who love the art scene in Berlin, the music scene in Berlin. It's very young. Um, so there's a lot of people who gaming companies who are actually building their base in Berlin, and using this as a way to attract very young talent, and have them work in Berlin. So there are plenty of companies which are, I would say, more concentrated in the mobile gaming, in contrast to, let's say, a PC or console. I mean, there are companies which are doing that, but I would say it's a lot more towards mobile. Not as much, I would say, towards, for example, virtual reality. I think this is a domain that is growing, but it's not growing at the pace that mobile gaming is actually trending towards. So I would say the overall gaming scene is quite healthy from a career perspective too. So I would, anybody interested, absolutely, you coming to Germany, coming to Berlin, especially, I think it would be easy to break into the Berlin gaming scene.
Playing a game is definitely very entertaining and very easy to do, but I can imagine that creating a game is not that easy and maybe a much more complicated and multidisciplinary task.
Mhm.
So what in your view, what is the game creation process typically like, and what kind of roles or career paths are involved in this?
Yeah. So I think I can talk majorly on what like on mobile side of things, right? I don't have any experience whatsoever developing games for PC or consoles, or augmented reality or VR. I don't have any experience there, so I can't really talk for those kinds of games. But obviously the underlying teams or disciplines that are involved would kind of be similar. So there's the I can just quickly list out all these different sort of disciplines that are involved in here. But the scale of which, like for example, in console games, when you talk about AAA games, it just refers to how much the budget of a project is, and it's usually whenever you're making a game like I don't know, Witcher, or any of the big titles, Cyberpunk, for example, that's coming out. All these Halo or whichever ones these are all like several multi-million dollar projects with team sizes of 200 or 300 people who are all working towards building one game that would be costing around $60. So those games usually have a much different team setup, and much bigger sizes in general. For mobile, on the other side, the budgets are usually a lot lesser. I mean, you can basically be making a game at almost just one person's cost, whatever that's going to be, to also running into several millions of dollars. But what works on mobile is usually the free games and not necessarily the paid ones. So the games that are where you would be spending $1 or $2 upfront, those are the games that usually don't tend to make as much money. So and so you would usually be looking at teams which are making games that are free to play. That's what they are called as. and
Okay.
and the disciplines that are involved in, I would say, like the common ones that are across PC, console games or mobile games would usually be like the game designers. So I mean, uh, this is a pretty straightforward role. These are the guys who are going to design the mechanics, which means what does the player do in the game, right? Like, is he going to shoot with a gun, or is he going to pull the birds back and fire the birds at an obstacle? Now that's a mechanic, right? So that's, and I'm quoting the example of Angry Birds, for example.
Yeah.
And what are the different systems that go in it? Like, when you're playing, for example, Angry Birds, can you make your birds more stronger? That's a system, and it's like an upgrade system on top of your birds. So and then what are the numbers behind it? Like, how, if you take the example of Angry Birds itself, how strong is the red bird in comparison to the yellow bird, for example. And when you fire the yellow bird, what is the speed of it? And all these things is also, it would be classified as balancing. And all these aspects are actually developed by a game designer. Now, a game designer can also be having a second position there called as an economy designer, and they would basically be designing, how much how much does it cost to upgrade a bird, how much coins are needed for that, and if you don't have coins, how much coins can you actually buy from a shop for spending real money. And so these are the economy designers, but usually they all fall under the bracket of game design as a discipline. Then you have the artists, and here I would say that there are two main streams. One are the generalists, who are actually drawing, physically drawing, using a digital tool like I don't know, Adobe Illustrator, for example, or using 3ds Max or Maya to create 3D models. I mean, there's a lot more free tools today like Modo or Blender, for example, with which you can also create extremely good 3D art. And These I would classify as generalist artists who are actually creating the very core of what goes into the games itself. What how do the characters look, and what is their color like? Do they fit? Do they fit the world? Like, for example, in Angry Birds, you have a very cartoon style, and that's something that these artists define. Obviously, there are different sub roles in this, like an art director, and who would be defining how should the game look. Now, these are, I wouldn't go deeper into any of these, but rather the two main roles would be generalist artists, who can be 2D or 3D artists. And then there are the technical artists who are doing less of the drawing, but more so on technical integration. So, meaning, um, how do the animation side of it, how do you rig the characters. I think there will be a lot of crossover with generalists, but more so the technical artists are very much working directly inside the game itself, like looking at the lighting and all that stuff. Then there are the UI/UX guys who are, obviously, giving the player the experience of, how do the menus look, how does the game flow, when you move from starting a level in Candy Crush. What do you see to, what are the buttons on the menus, and how do you end a level? How does that feel? So these are the UI/UX artists. So those are the, I said two disciplines, but rather there are three sub disciplines in artists. And then there's the sound designers who make the sound, who compose and the music and that. And then there are producers. So these are kind of like project managers who take care of, the timelines, who's doing what, are we on time, are what kind of processes is it running an agile methodology, using Scrum or using Kanban, whatever works for a specific team. The producer is the guy who puts it all together, to deliver a product. And then you have the developers, usually backend and depending on what kind of game it is, a backend engineer would be needed, and then there would be the front end engineers. So I would say, like, a lot of times backend technology is also, today we have ready to use out of box systems, so you can just, for example, Firebase from Google, you can just use those backend systems. But if you need something more complex, then you would absolutely need a backend engineer as well. And then there is QA, who are the backbone of making sure that the game is playable enough and doesn't break when it goes into the hand of consumers. So these are like the core disciplines that would, be across, PC or console and mobile games as well. And then there will be some additional positions which I can, quickly go through as well. So I think story writers is something that you would also find in console. When there is a story based game, they may or may not exist on mobile, depending on the kind of games that there are. I think off late there are mobile games which have more stories, so you can see story writers also in there. But on mobile specifically, there are some additional roles like marketing and CRM. You need to acquire players, so you need someone who's running the campaigns on Google platforms or on Facebook, for example. And there are many more other ad networks, but so the marketing folks would be needed to optimize that, to handle how much are we willing to spend to buy the users. And then there's the CRM side of things, where you once you acquire the users, how do you engage them with a Facebook post, for example, and this, so that makes up the marketing. And then there's the business intelligence data analysts who are looking at the data that is gathered from the games. I mean, if just for full disclosure, obviously, when you're playing any mobile game which is free, there is someone in that is watching what you're doing in the game. So every every gem that you swap in Candy Crush would be tracked. Every booster that you're using in Candy Crush is being tracked, and it's only through that process do we as game designers know how the game is working. Whether it is fun or not fun, whether something that we introduced makes sense or doesn't make sense, and if it does make sense, can we improve it to be even better. So that happens only because of data tracking, and for that usually there is the BI and data analysts who help the product teams understand what's working and what's not. And then there's the product managers, which you would not necessarily see in the console side of gaming, and these are the guys who take care of what are the next features that we should be building, what is the cost of it from time and effort standpoint, as well as financially. How what are the different A/B tests we run? So product managers is something that's I would say more so evolved as a position only in this in the gaming industry only in the last decade or so. It has originally been a role in other industries, like in e-commerce, for example, who are constantly just looking at how to improve click-through rates of how to improve the visibility of their features, for example. So product managers play a pretty important role in making sure that the product is going in the right direction, and that it is uh, returning the investments that are being made into it. So that's kind of sums up. I mean, it was a long list, but I think there are opportunities across the board, and there are people who are able to do it alone. So they basically combine everything, and that's what you see in indie games. A lot of single developers who are able to do everything, or two people who are able to do everything that's listed, that I just listed out. Um, or then there are teams who are 100 people, 200 people, who are a combination of all of these roles that I just described. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great that you listed out all these roles, because yeah, someone who is interested in one or more of these roles can then basically orient themselves and focus on that. Uh, yeah, and actually, I was thinking, yeah, this would be very multidisciplinary, but it would be so multidisciplinary. I never thought about that. So
There's really just three pillars, right? Like, or rather, four pillars. There would be the design, there's the art, then there's the sound, and then there's development. And then there would be and QA would basically be validating all of the work that's been done by all these guys. So I think but that's very broadly speaking. But when you start digging in, there's a lot of individual roles that go into all these broad disciplines, and I would say that, like, anybody who's interested in pursuing a career, I think it's really comes down to what drives you. What is it that you really enjoy doing? Like, do you enjoy making sounds? Then I think you should pursue a career in sound design. So, or if you like doing art, then you can be drawing concepts, so you become a concept artist. Or you like the lighting side of things, and how the mood of the world looks, then you can be a much more technical artist. So I think there's positions across the board, I would say.
and as head of product at Huge Games,
Mhm.
what is your role specifically in this game creation process?
Yeah. So I think it's the vision holder of what the project is going to be. So that's kind of the one line to describe it is, if I'm building a product, and that product has to make several $1 million for the company, then it is me as a head of product. That's my responsibility to figure out, like, what is this game. Um, I think to just go back a little bit. uh, you know the free to play games that I just mentioned previously, these are the games that you don't just build them and forget about it. These are called games as a service, which means they are living. and the games don't really end in production. It's not like, you made Halo, and then you did all the QA and whatnot, and then you did your marketing. You burned the discs, or uh, this is in context of when you would actually buy game DVDs and Blu-rays back in the day, and then you're done. You've shipped a game, and then there's no more working on Halo One or Halo Two, for example, whatever that is. In free to play games, it's usually, you build a game and then you go through the process of making the game better. And once you make the games better, then you need the content for it. So you have to constantly add new things, and that's the only way that players will stick with your game. So because when a game is free, there's no commitment to it, right? And the only way players can commit to a game is when they actually enjoy playing the game, and there's more content to consume. So it's kind of like this podcast. I mean, if I enjoy listening to this podcast, I would want to hear more of what does Paras have to offer. And if he's doing that on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, I would, be quite engaged with your podcast overall. So that's kind of, what free to play games are, is that they are software as a service, in the entertainment division. And when you're building these games, there are two phases. One is more like a pre-launch and post-launch. And post-launch is basically how you service the game, which is, you create more content uh, to whatever that's already working. And this is called the live ops. What I have built my career around is around the pre-launch phase. So, what that means is, what kind of games are we building and why are we building them? How much money are we going to make out of it? What kind of metrics are we looking at? Is this like a completely innovative product that's going to disrupt the market, which means it is extremely high risk? Or is it something that, people are saying, oh, this is, I would say that, like, this is like Angry Birds, but it's you play with a friend, for example. It's so is that an iterative product that we are building? How much are we able to market this game in a cost effective manner? Can we quickly prototype it? How much time does it take to produce the first version that can be tested already in the market? And then, how many people do we need to make it? And, are we hitting the metrics? How do we soft launch? So, and what do we do after launching the game? Once we test it with a small market size, how do we roll it out globally? So, all these questions are part of what my job basically comprises of. Is how do you take something that does not exist, and then you create it, and then make sure you're able to put it out in the market, test it with the consumers. If it succeeds, then how do you scale it up? And then, once the product is ready to be scaled up, and then we are able to add, more content to the game, and then the game can basically operate uh, with a much bigger team. Then I personally would prefer to concentrate on something new as a challenge. And also in my role, it's also important that I make a decision on saying, if we are not able to hit the metrics that we are required to, then we kill the game. And it's a very I would say it's a very difficult thing to do, is something that you worked on for a year, for example, or 2 years or 3 years, and then you just say this is not working out, and then you just basically decide not to continue that project anymore. It's a very difficult feeling, but it is something that you get used to it, and the sooner you do it, the better it is, because then you don't spend too much time getting attached to the product, and you don't spend much money on doing that either. So, in a nutshell, it's basically about my role really revolves around what kind of products do we build, how do we build it, a lot of game design, a lot of data analytics, a lot of production as well, managing people. So it covers. a lot of ground, but mostly on the product side of things. So I don't do anything that's technical. The as technical as I can get is probably just running some SQL queries. That's pretty much it.
Okay. It's very interesting. You mentioned this term, games as a service. I always think, yeah, okay, you have a mobile game, you launch it, and then, yeah, you don't have so much to do afterwards. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting that you kind of showed that, yeah, there is this continuous improvement still going on, and you are still taking decisions even after the game is launched, and how your role uh, in leading this entire product and this product strategy comes in. It's yeah, I completely understand now.
I'm glad I've been able to at least provide some clarity. Hopefully, it wasn't vague enough.
It was perfect. And would you, in your opinion, say that there are any specific skills or roles that are in demand in the gaming industry at the moment?
Um, I would say there's no specific demand as such. It depends on the state of the industry, and depends on what you as an individual personally like, and what's your area of interest, that is. So I mean, the first aspect, which is whether the industry is doing well, it is doing really well. So I think there's plenty of opportunities, whether it is in the US or rest of the world. I think you are able to see game development studios come up everywhere. Even in India, the scene in game development today is a lot more serious, and there's gaming as a career is becoming a real thing even in India. So if you're looking for something, you don't have to look outside of India to begin with. You can always find something, whether it is in Mumbai or Delhi or in Bangalore. All these three hubs actually have a lot of game development studios, even in Hyderabad, for example. Um, yeah, so I think the one steady demand that will always exist is for developers. I mean, there's not enough game developers that the industry can you can always find development positions, whether I would say like front end more than back end. And so there will always be a demand for that. And when it comes to like what kind of technologies and things like that, I think you as a developer should not restrict yourself to be tied down to one specific language or one specific tool, because I think there's the industry uses a lot of different languages for programming and tools in what they use to create the games. So you can either be making a 3D game, which would require a C sharp, for example, and you could be making using a completely different game engine which uses C++, for example, or Lua, or Python, whichever that is, whatever scripting languages that are being used. Or you could be making a game in HTML5, for example. So I would say, I think, to start your career, I would never want anyone to tie down themselves to specific languages. And this is when more so specifically for software engineers. For every other discipline, again, it's I think for an artist, if you really like art, then you should really work on making your portfolio solid. Because I when I'm hiring for an artist, I'm not looking at the schools that you've been to, or even the games that you made. I think having a successful game in your portfolio is amazing. But as a junior artist, I think it's very difficult to have that on your resume. So if you don't have a successful game on your resume, then what do you have? And I think that what can you produce is sample works, putting your stuff on Behance, for example, which is the go-to portal for all the artists. It's kind of a social network for all the artists, and they can showcase their work there. So it's important that even artists are able to create their work and showcase that, and that's the way you would judge someone on how good their work is. So that's and that's one thing. Again, artists are also not in plenty, and good artists are really difficult to come by. So you know just pick something that you really enjoy doing, and really focus on that. I think the easiest way to figure out like what do you enjoy the most in game development is by actually making a game, participating in a game jam, for example. There's plenty of them that happen every year, which are either you can also just do it locally, whether it is in your college or in your school. Just start making a game. There's plenty of tools also to get started on. Even if you don't know programming, you can build a game on Roblox, for example. You just need to see what is the process involved in it. And I think if that process teaches you, oh, I actually enjoy building the logic of the game, then you might actually go down the route of development, and learn more scripting, and focus more on the software development side of it. Maybe you want your games to look much better, so then you'll probably start looking in the art side of things. And and then maybe sounds, if you enjoy what kind of experience your players want to have when they're completely involved in a game itself. So so I think the best thing to do is start making a game, and then seeing the challenges that are involved in it. And then if you enjoyed tackling one specific challenge, then I would say start going down that route, and you might see that that's the one that you like. And then further down, maybe you pursue an internship in a company that's in your area, or somewhere abroad. And even if it's a free internship, go for it. There's my wife, for example, when she moved to Berlin, she was she actually started in a games company in Berlin itself. And her start was really, look, I don't she doesn't have gaming industry experience, but she's actually excited about being there. So she just offered to do a free internship at a gaming company, and they said, that's amazing. But Germany being Germany, they just said, oh, we don't do free, so you have to, there's no there's rules regulating internships, and that they always have to be paid. Uh, at least that's basically what was told to her. And they did set her up with a paid internship, and that's how she also got a stint in the gaming industry. It's a different thing that she didn't stick around, but it was good for her to also just get the knowledge of all the different disciplines that are in the gaming industry itself. So that's one of the recommendations that I have is, don't, when you start your career, don't think about like the money involved, but rather figure out like what actually is something that you would enjoy doing in game development itself. um, yeah, and then further down, if you really want to study something, then there's plenty of options today. Don't just look at US. I think there are lots of game companies in the US, but also there are lots of companies in Europe and in India too. So if you want to study, obviously there's I think a lot more options in the US and in Europe. So I would recommend hunting both these options, and not just get stuck to the USA or North America. Like Canada also has a lot of different schools. So do your research. I think there's a lot more today than it was 10 years ago. So I'm sure you can find something.
Yeah, actually, earlier you had mentioned about you had talked about your background, and you had mentioned that you did your master's at Carnegie Mellon in entertainment technology.
Yeah.
So I think that sounds very, very interesting. First of all, it's very different from the usual path of doing an MBA or doing a master's in computer science or
Yeah.
something like that. So I wonder how was your experience in this master's, and perhaps you have some suggestions of other paths that people could uh, take other than doing this master's for getting into this game development industry.
Sure. So I think CMU was one of those first universities to explore the side of entertainment technology itself, and entertainment technology is a very broad term, and also the program was pretty broad. um, and the university was collaborating with, for example, Disney and Disney theme parks, as well as with Pixar, for example, and then with Blizzard. So this university was already working with game development studios, as well as theme parks, for example, or movies. So entertainment technology, as it was a much broad program which allowed you to explore any of these industries. So when I went to this program with the intention of game development itself. So I know some of the folks who came from Bangalore itself, who were with me in my program, and my juniors also, for example. They ended up in the film industry, and some of them ended up in designing theme parks, working on roller coaster designs, and so like physical installations, entertainment in for example, when you're how do you make a roller coaster more fun, like by adding one twist, does that make it more fun? I think the so this program was broad enough for us to then figure out, once we are there, what is it that we really enjoy the most. And also the program was very much project driven, which means every semester, we collaborated with real companies. So for 2 semesters I spent with a company called Williams Gaming, and they basically made the slot machines that are that you can see in Vegas, for example. So I spent 2 semesters building a proof of concept project for them. And then one semester I spent working with Lockheed Martin, which, am I proud of it? I'm not sure, because it's a defense company, but it was humongous experience from, building something which was in a entirely different field. It was all about serious games. And, how do you build games that are not entertainment, but rather they are more so for saving lives on the field, for example, saving lives of your army personnel. So it was quite different projects that I explored there. And when you do these projects, you're given a specific challenge, and you then find the process of how do you tackle this problem, and then come up with a solution. Is it the right solution? Doesn't matter. I think that was the point of the program, was you can make your mistakes right now, and then learn the process. The next time around, you will, even if you failed, the next time around, how to get there much faster. So I think that was like one of the big learnings coming out of the master's program. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Actually, it sounds like a very, very interesting program, I have to say. Yeah, yeah. It also kind of leads me to my next question.
Mhm.
So you've lived and worked in India and the US, and now you're in Germany.
Yeah.
Why is it that you decided to move to Germany?
Yeah, but the reason why I decided to move to Germany was because one of the companies that I really wanted to work for, which was Vuga, was based here. And when I started my gaming career with Zynga, like way back in 2009, where I was working for then popular game called Mafia Wars. If you were on Facebook in 2009 and playing Mafia Wars, I was one of the guys working on the games there. So this was, that was like the sort of my start of the career, where was like, oh my god, this free to play games is a completely different beast. I mean, it was not something that I wanted to get started with. I mean, my ideal company was working for EA, and maybe working on Need for Speed. But I started I'm glad that I I was given this opportunity to work on a completely new genre of game that are not a business model of a game that was evolving, which is the free to play games. So while while I was at Zynga, I was also looking at what are the other companies that and are there in this in this field of free to play games, and Vuga was one of them, and they were based out of Germany in Berlin, and so I moved here in 2011, and yeah, so basically that was really the reason why I moved, was trying to pursue my career in this specific company, and I stuck around with them for 4.5 years, and I've been now in three different companies in Berlin itself. I forgot to mention about like the 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 other aspects, which is the it's not just the career, but I think there's culturally, how things work in India as well as in the US and Germany. I think there's a big difference in the work life balance. I see myself, I'm much more efficient with my use of time, that I spend. Do I work from 9 to 6? Not really. I mean, I try to, I have my flexible hours. I start usually at around 10, and then I take a lot of I do take smaller breaks in between, and usually end by 6 or 7, depends. But there's no real fixed time to the stuff that I'm doing, and yeah, but rather the times that I'm actually putting into what I'm doing is hyper focused. And I think that's one thing that I've learned being here is I think Germans, or Europeans in general that I've met, whether it is Finns or Germans, they are super productive in the amount of time that they are here. And then you get the time to then be outside after your work hours, whether it is socializing or spending time with your family. So I really like that aspect. And also now after all these years, I realize that there's also much better social system that's present in Germany, which is like gaming is a very it's a hit driven business. So maybe the games that you make are completely bust and your company is out of money, and then you're unemployed. So what do you do? And I think Germany has a very strong social system that way, where if you do fail, and if you're fired, if you're let go or fired from your company, you still have the backing from your government to then have not be struggling with your money. And then you can, so you have the options to take the risks. And that, from that aspect, I would also say Germany and Europe in general has much better social system in place than India and US. From the number of companies that are in this field, I would say they are still a lot more in the US, but Europe is catching up as well, and there are a lot more companies in Europe as well as now in India too. So I think it's really it's just coming down to what's your preference. So whether you can choose to be anywhere, and especially now with the pandemic, I think you can basically be sitting anywhere in the world and making games, because I think especially developing games, the hardest part is the brainstorming part, which is how do you exchange creative ideas with your team. But other than that, everything else is, you can stay anywhere in the world and produce art, or write a piece of code, or create music. You can do all of that being anywhere in the world.
And would you have any advice for people who are looking to build a career in games in Germany?
Sure. I think just to build your career, I would say play lots of games. And when you are, it's my in-laws and my parents, they keep asking, like, so am I playing games all day? And I'm like, yeah, I do play games, but obviously when you are in the business of games, it's a bit difficult to enjoy them as much, because I think you are always trying to find, there are lots of questions when you're playing a game, especially. I mean, I think it could just be me, but I just end up always trying to ask, like, why has this been done this way, how are they doing this? And so there's a lot of questions that just every time I start playing a game on my phone, I'm just asking all these questions rather than actually having fun with it. I would say but also, like, maybe the fun I do have is when I'm playing games that I'm not actively specializing in. So if I'm playing a game on my console or on PC, maybe I would enjoy those, but I don't have enough time to be playing them. That said, I would recommend anyone who does have the time to play more games and ask questions of why and how they are made. Second thing I would say is, make your own games. I think this is super important because that's the only way you're going to find out, like, what aspect of game development do you really enjoy. And there's plenty of free resources today. There's no coding tools also out there where you don't have to know anything about programming, and you can get started. I can recommend something like Unity, for example. Obviously, Unity engine is a lot more advanced, but it is the game engine that a majority of the game developers are using, especially the smaller game developers. They just end up using this because it's also free. So there's Unity engine, and then there is free tutorials available on Unity website of how to make games, and then they have something called an asset store, which helps you. If you need sounds or you need art, it's all available, and there are lots of free stuff as well on the store, so you can use all of that to make a game that you actually want to build, and see how it feels to go through that process. The next advice I would have is to participate in, like, game jams. They usually help. If you're ideally, game jams would work with the team, so this would help you then see how team dynamics work. And the challenge is really, in a game jam, the time constraint. And when you extrapolate that in real world, that's really how things would be. You have limited amount of time, and you have people that you would work with together to make a game, and you have to make the best game. The good thing with game jam is there's no it's really just an exercise. It's You're competing for maybe a reward, but in real world, you are competing to stay alive in that studio, or your business could basically go down if you don't make a successful game. But when you're doing game jams, it gives you this uh, very short window of time to really see how teams work together to put an amazing game together, and what does it take to get there. The next point I would say is maybe doing a lot of internships. And if you're in school, or whether you're in college, um, just go get an internship in a in a game studio. And I think companies would be happy to support this desire from students. Um, and if you're not a student, and if you're looking to switch your career, then I would say it's probably best to concentrate on some of the other advices that I gave, which is to make your own games, show have build up a portfolio to showcase the skills that you have. And when you actually go through all these processes, you will find the aspect of game development that you would really really enjoy, because games at the end of the day are require a lot of passion. And I think if you are not passionate about what you're doing, I don't think you would be able to make a great game. So and whether that's in programming, whether that's in art, whether sound, or project management as well. I mean, if you're not passionate about games, I think you will very likely not be able to deliver. And at the same time, I think you should be very much tuned to the idea that when you're making games, it's a hit driven business. That means the games could be a complete flop, and that means the game might be cancelled. So build those games with a lot of love that you're building, but don't fall in love with them, because I think if you do fall in love, then you get too attached to it, and when you decide to kill those games, it would feel really bad. So yeah, I think that's kind of the advice I would give.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking to you, hearing all your personal experiences, your own journey of how you built your career in this very entertaining industry, let's say. Uh, it was really interesting speaking to you. Thank you for all your valuable advice and experience, Chaitanya.
Awesome. Thanks, Paras. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully, it'll be useful for anybody out there who is interested in game development.
That's all, folks. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and check out our blog on indiatogermany.com. See you in the next episode.